Bikini Bottom was always bustling with life. The warm glow of the sea sun bathed the coral streets as SpongeBob Squarepants skipped down Conch Street. His trusty jellyfishing net swung by his side, and his trademark grin stretched from sponge to sponge. Today was jellyfishing day, his favourite day of the week, and his best friend Patrick Star had promised to join him for their usual adventure. Excitedly, SpongeBob knocked on Patrick's boulder-shaped home. "Patrick, are you in there?" he called, pressing his ear to the rock. Silence greeted him. SpongeBob frowned. Patrick never missed jellyfishing, especially not without saying something. "Maybe he's already at Jellyfish Fields," SpongeBob thought aloud. Brushing off his unease, he skipped toward the fields, determination brightening his stride. Jellyfish Fields, usually alive with buzzing jellyfish and soft ocean breezes, felt eerily quiet. SpongeBob wandered the pink grass, calling for Patrick. His voice echoed across the empty fields. "Patrick, are you here?" No answer, no buzzing jellyfish, only an unsettling stillness. "Maybe Patrick got distracted," SpongeBob reasoned, forcing a laugh. "He's probably at Goofy Goober's, devouring a triple sundae." But the uneasy feeling in his stomach refused to fade. Back in town, SpongeBob asked everyone he saw if they'd seen Patrick. At Bargain Mart, the Salty Spittoon, and even Goofy Goober's, the answer was the same. No one had seen him. Stranger still, other residents had begun noticing something odd. "Have you seen Larry the Lobster?" a customer asked at the Krusty Krab, while SpongeBob handed over an order. "Larry?" SpongeBob tilted his head. Come to think of it, he hadn't seen Larry in days, nor Sandy at her tree dome. SpongeBob's cheerful optimism dimmed. Bikini Bottom was a close-knit community. People didn't just disappear. SpongeBob decided to confide in Mr. Krabs. "Patrick's missing, Mr. Krabs," he said, "and so are Larry and Sandy. Doesn't that seem weird?" But Mr. Krabs barely looked up from his cash register. "People come and go, lad. Focus on flipping them patties. We've got a full house tonight." The Krusty Krab was busier than SpongeBob had ever seen. Customers packed every table, raving about the new Krabby Patties. "This is the best patty I've ever had," one customer exclaimed, grease dripping from his chin. "Yeah, it's addictive," another murmured, licking his fingers with a glazed expression. The praise should have filled SpongeBob with pride, but something felt off. He wasn't doing anything differently. The recipe hadn't changed, had it? "Squidward?" SpongeBob whispered during a brief lull. "Have you noticed anything weird lately?" "Other than working with you?" Squidward snapped, but then his usual sarcasm softened. "Actually, I've been hearing strange noises at night. Probably just rats. Not that I care." The comment lingered in SpongeBob's mind. That night, after the last customer left and Squidward clocked out, SpongeBob decided to stay late and investigate. He scrubbed the kitchen with exaggerated enthusiasm, keeping an eye on Mr. Krabs, who was busy counting money. "Closing up, boyo?" Mr. Krabs asked, his claws snapping the register shut. "Not yet, Mr. Krabs. Thought I'd give the place a little extra shine," SpongeBob replied cheerfully. Mr. Krabs' eyes narrowed. "Don't go poking your nose where it don't belong, lad." SpongeBob forced a laugh as Mr. Krabs retreated to his office. Once the coast was clear, he tiptoed toward the freezer. The frosted steel door loomed before him, and he reached for the handle. A low grinding noise, like the sound of machinery chewing through something, stopped him cold. His heart pounded. He hesitated, but his curiosity won. SpongeBob pulled the door open and icy air billowed out. Inside, everything seemed normal at first, shelves of frozen patties and buns. But then he noticed a small, unmarked door hidden behind a stack of crates. A heavy padlock secured it. "What's this?" SpongeBob whispered. He touched the lock, and a faint, foul smell made him recoil. His stomach churned as he realized he had stumbled onto something he wasn't meant to find. Before he could investigate further, Mr. Krabs' voice thundered behind him. "What are you doing, boyo?" SpongeBob spun around, nearly dropping the flashlight he'd brought. Mr. Krabs stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching ominously across the room. I heard a noise and thought I should check," SpongeBob stammered. Mr. Krabs' expression darkened. "The freezer's off limits after hours. You wouldn't want to ruin the surprise, would you?" "Surprise?" SpongeBob echoed, confused. Mr. Krabs leaned closer, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "A new secret ingredient. Business is booming because of it, but it's top secret. Only I know what it is." SpongeBob nodded nervously and backed away. As Mr. Krabs watched him leave, SpongeBob couldn't shake the feeling that his boss was hiding something far worse than a recipe. The next night, when Mr. Krabs left early, SpongeBob saw his chance. He grabbed the keys from the office and unlocked the mysterious door. What lay beyond chilled him to his core. The room was a hidden basement lined with industrial machines that hummed ominously. On a table in the center lay tools stained with fresh and dried blood. But what caught SpongeBob's eye were the walls lined with hooks. Hanging from them were items he recognized: Sandy's helmet, Larry's sash, Patrick's swim trunks. A wave of nausea overtook him. He staggered back, barely keeping himself upright. His friends hadn't disappeared. They had been processed. The sound of the hatch above creaking open froze him. Mr. Krabs' heavy footsteps descended the stairs. "Thought you could snoop around, eh?" his voice growled. SpongeBob darted behind a machine, heart hammering in his chest. Mr. Krabs reached the bottom, a blood-stained knife gleaming in his claw. "Come out, lad, let's talk," Mr. Krabs coaxed, his tone dripping with menace. SpongeBob held his breath, clutching his flashlight. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Mr. Krabs snarled, "This ain't over," and stormed back up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut. Left alone in the chilling basement, SpongeBob's mind raced. He needed to escape. He needed to warn Bikini Bottom, but most of all, he needed to stop Mr. Krabs, whatever the cost. SpongeBob stood frozen in the basement, his breath shallow and quick. The horrifying truth clung to him like the cold, damp air. Mr. Krabs was a murderer. His friends had been turned into the very food that the citizens of Bikini Bottom couldn't stop devouring. The Krabby Patty secret ingredient wasn't a recipe, it was a nightmare. Gripping his flashlight, SpongeBob forced himself to move. He couldn't leave without proof. Spotting a camera Mr. Krabs had hidden in the corner, SpongeBob realized it was still recording. He snatched the tape, tucking it into his pocket before glancing toward the stairs. The coast was clear for now. As he crept back through the freezer, his mind raced. What would he do? Who could he trust? The weight of the truth pressed down on him, but the thought of Patrick, Sandy, and the others gave him the courage to continue. He had to expose Mr. Krabs. When SpongeBob returned home, he locked the door and barricaded it with furniture. He played the tape on an old TV, his hands trembling. The footage confirmed his worst fears. Mr. Krabs dragging bodies into the basement, dismantling them with cold efficiency, and feeding his horrifying operation. SpongeBob recoiled, his eyes wide with disbelief. This "This can't be real," he whispered, though deep down he knew it was. The next morning, SpongeBob went to the one place he hoped would listen, the Bikini Bottom Police Department. But when he arrived, his voice shaking as he explained what he'd seen, the officers exchanged skeptical glances. "Mr. Krabs? The guy who's been feeding the whole town for years?" one officer asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. "SpongeBob, you've been working too hard. No, you don't understand. He's a monster," SpongeBob pleaded, pulling out the tape. "It's all here. Just watch." The officers reluctantly played the footage. As the horrifying images filled the screen, the room grew silent. When the tape ended, the chief of police turned to his officers, his face pale. "Get a team down to the Krusty Krab now." SpongeBob's relief was short-lived. By the time they arrived at the Krusty Krab, the restaurant was eerily empty. Mr. Krabs had vanished, leaving behind only the blood-stained basement as evidence of his crimes. The machinery still hummed, and the smell of death hung in the air. The days that followed were a blur. The Krusty Krab was shut down. The truth splashed across every front page. Bikini Bottom mourned its losses, grappling with the horrifying reality that the town's favorite eatery had been a slaughterhouse. SpongeBob returned to his pineapple under the sea, the emptiness in his home echoing the loss of Patrick and Sandy. Jellyfish Fields felt lonelier without his best friend by his side. The guilt of not uncovering the truth sooner weighed heavily on him. One evening, as SpongeBob sat staring at a picture of him and Patrick, a knock sounded at his door. He opened it to find Squidward holding a tray of kelp brownies. I thought you might need some company," Squidward said awkwardly. SpongeBob's lip quivered, and he pulled Squidward into a hug. "Thank you, Squidward." All right. Don't make this weird," Squidward grumbled, though he didn't pull away. Life in Bikini Bottom slowly returned to normal, though the scars of Mr. Krabs' crimes lingered. SpongeBob vowed never to let anything like this happen again. He returned to jellyfishing and flipping patties, this time at a new restaurant run by a kind-hearted whale. Though his friends were gone, their memories stayed with him. SpongeBob Squarepants, ever the optimist, carried their spirits forward, determined to protect the town he loved from darkness, no matter how deep it ran beneath the waves. The horrifying truth was that Mr. Krabs was still out there, lurking somewhere in the shadows, and SpongeBob vowed to bring him to justice.